So I'm coming to you today to add a little bit of clarity after having about 24 hours since the release of this guidance from the IRS. The Treasury Department, the IRS, they released this guidance yesterday and made it very, very clear that the tax credit is fully refundable if you transfer this credit over to the dealer. Essentially what they're saying is if you transfer this credit to a dealer starting January 1st of 2024, when you do that, you have to declare the entire amount of tax credit the vehicle is eligible for. So if the vehicle is eligible for $7,500, you have to take $7,500. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. If it only qualifies for half, you have to take the full $3,750. Now, the challenge is this is stated to be a non-refundable tax credit, meaning if you took $7,500, you only had $4,000 in tax liability, you would then owe $3,500 at the end of the year. But the IRS guidance, the Treasury Department's guidance, states that they will not go for recapture in the event that you transfer this over to the dealer. So there's been a lot of confusion about this topic, and there's been a lot of conflicting answers out there, and I've spent a ton of time digging into this, not just the law, but also this guidance from the Treasury Department. There are a number of documents that were released, 27 pages, 93 pages. I mean, there's some huge documents, and I've dissected all of them, and I finally figured out what exactly is happening here, and that's what I'm going to cover today. So make sure you stick around to the end. I know it's not exciting. I know there's not a lot of fun to be had with this conversation, but I promise you it will be well worth your time. I will explain everything for you, so that way you're as clear as you possibly could be at this point in time. Okay, so here's the deal. There's two things you need to consider. Number one is the law. The law is written by Congress, and in the law, it will outline certain things. Example, the EV tax credit being non-refundable is outlined very clearly in the law. This is a non-refundable tax credit. That means you can only claim as much as you have tax liability. Now, don't get tax liability and your tax refund confused. Those are two very different things. Make sure you check out this video here to find out more if you're not 100% sure on what your tax liability is. On the other hand, we have this document from the Treasury Department that says this is not under the guidance of recapture in the event that you transfer this to a dealer. So both are very clear. Starting January 1st of 2024, you can transfer this credit over to the dealer. For further details in this guidance, we now know you have to transfer that full credit. And in doing so, you are potentially exposing yourself to having to owe back the IRS at the end of the year. However, the IRS has said that they will not go after recapture, which the law very clearly says there is a recapture. So how are they doing this? And what should I believe? Well, the problem is the law says one thing, the institution that implements the law says something entirely different. Generally in history, what happens at this point is a lawsuit is brought forward and this is settled in the courts. It's not like a criminal lawsuit or anything like that, but they have to abide by the law. This doesn't necessarily jive with what the law is saying. However, essentially what the Secretary has done in partnership with the Treasury Department and non-elected officials is they have come together and they have found a very interesting loophole to maximize this credit for the most amount of taxpayers. So what they have done is this. Follow this logic. It's actually quite brilliant. When you transfer that tax credit over to the dealer, it is now subject to the tax liability of the dealer. However, both in the law and in this guidance, we know that the dealer itself is not impacted by having to report more revenue, or their tax liability has no basis or bearing on the qualification of this tax credit for the taxpayer. What they've said is when you transfer this over, it falls under the dealer's tax liability, but the dealer's tax liability has no bearing on qualifications and cannot have an impact on that dollar amount. So what they're basically saying is this tax credit bounces against nobody's tax liability if you transfer this over to a dealer. It's an interesting loophole. I do not know if it's legal. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a CPA. This is not financial advice, but I have no idea if this is even legal. Now, rest assured, Joe Manchin is extremely likely to challenge this in the courts. He has already said earlier this year that he is disappointed in how they are doing this already. And this was before this guidance was released. In fact, he said something to the effect of non-elected officials and their appointees have come together to make this a partisan agenda to push this through, and it is not in alignment with the intent of what the law was. And he's not wrong. This is not in line with the intent of the law, which was it's a non-refundable tax credit. And by rolling it out the way that they have with this loophole, it is a refundable tax credit if you transfer this over to the dealer. So in a sense, he's not wrong, but the question remains. Number one, will this be challenged? I think there's probably a good chance it'll be challenged. Number two, will it be upheld? That's really the trump card here. Nobody knows what this is going to look like in the courts. And will this hold up? Will this not? It's very likely to get expedited once it's challenged because the implementation date is January 1st of 2024. So hopefully we will get a true stance on this before the end of this year. I'm honestly very impressed on the loophole that they were able to put into this thing. I don't know if it'll stand, but quite honestly, for all the loopholes that much richer folks than myself get, it's nice to see the rest of us get a chance, at least this once. So I, of course, hope that this stands. And in a response to my video yesterday, I will be pulling that down now because this is more updated information. And I think that this is a more accurate way to explain the situation. Nobody's wrong right now. So the people who are saying you absolutely get the $7,500 credit, you're not wrong. And the people that say, no, it's a non-refundable credit, they're also not wrong. The problem is we have the law saying one thing and we have the institution saying something entirely different. So like I said, the only thing that matters is how this is going to end up going down. It's going to be challenged. Will the court hold up what the IRS is doing in this situation? If you want that full $7,500, you better hope that it is upheld. And it's actually good news. So for people who are retired or live on a fixed income and have little or no tax liability, they have no access to this tax credit. So this could be a game changer. In addition, this expands the availability of the tax credit to more people. You see, as it sits right now, you have to make a reasonable salary to have the kind of tax liability that you need to qualify for this. So, for example, if you're a family of four and you only make $75,000 a year, you don't have enough tax liability to get this full credit. But if you make $250,000 a year as a family of four, you do. Everybody gets the same access. And it's not just for the rich, as I keep seeing put out there. There is an income cap, and that is absolutely in place as well, both the law and this guidance. You cannot make more than $300,000 a year as a family, and as an individual, $150,000. So this is not for the rich. This is for working Americans, and that's what matters. So let me know in the comments what you think about this. Is this going to be upheld? Is this even going to be challenged? Do you think Joe Manchin will back down? Or do you think that this thing is definitely going to be challenged? I personally think it's going to be challenged. I just hope, just like many of you, that the courts uphold the guidance that was delivered by the secretary, but I have no idea if it's even legal, and I don't know enough to tell you that it probably is or probably isn't. So I hope this clarification helps, and as we wait for further clarity, hopefully this gives you a little bit of peace of mind, at least in the short term, that until we have more information, we really don't know 100% what happens next. Thanks so much for joining. I'll catch you next time.